Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, OP discovered his wife wasn't faithful. They met at the beach, dated, and married despite her parents' objections. She confessed to cheating before their wedding, which he forgave. 2 years later, she was caught cheating again. He exposed her to her parents, filed for divorce, and moved on, realizing he controls his own happiness. Now let's get into the story. I, 27 male, was married to my ex-wife, 24 female, for almost 2 years before I found out she wasn't as faithful as she claimed. My wife and I met at the beach on a summer afternoon, and we had a fantastic time together. She had come with a group of male and female college friends. They were all law students, but they decided to take a little break from school. I was also with a few friends, so some of us interacted with my wife and her friends, and we got along well. While other people's conversations ended that day after we left the beach toward different destinations, my wife and I exchanged numbers and kept talking occasionally. Shortly after we met, we started dating and married 2 years later. Before my wife and I married, our relationship was not smooth. My wife came from a well-to-do background, and her parents gave us a very tough time. They were against my wife dating someone like me, and they told her she would be making a grave mistake if she ended up with me. They said so because I worked 12 hours a day, had 2 different jobs, and couldn't get a good-paying job no matter how hard I tried. Her parents were a pain in the ass, but because we loved each other, we found to get married, with or without her parents' approval. After months of her parents trying to separate us, they stopped and accepted our relationship. With her parents out of our way, I expected we would not have any other issues, but I had no idea more was coming. 2 months before we married, my wife cheated on me with one of her classmates and confessed to me. She said it happened by mistake, and the guilt had been eating her up. Meanwhile, I had noticed during the time she claimed it happened that she was always looking sad and somehow depressed, and each time I questioned her to find out what was bothering her, she would say she was okay. When she confessed that she had cheated on me with her classmates and couldn't explain how it happened, I forgave her. Now that I share my story, I regret making such a mistake and wish I was smarter. I believed she wouldn't do it again because I felt if she came clean by herself and didn't wait for me to find out, then she was genuinely sorry. This was very hard on me, but because I was young, stupid, and in love, I forgave her, and she promised it would never happen again. We continued with our wedding and were married for almost 2 years, though we never discussed her escapade with her classmate again and never left my head. I remembered her confession every day, but I never mentioned it or talked about it. I tried my best to let it remain in the past because she had moved on, and she was trying her best to be my perfect wife. She was extremely nice to me, pampered me, and treated me like the only man in the world. I don't know if it was her way of saying sorry for what she had done, but irrespective of everything she did, each time I looked at her, I wondered if she was still sleeping with him behind me. It got to the point where I began to feel bad, because I thought I was still holding on to the past, and I wasn't enjoying our marriage like I should have. It took me a whole year after we married to forcefully put everything behind me and go with the flow. I knew I had not cared for her like I had initially planned from the beginning of our relationship. So I started making little effort, like making breakfast in bed for her and fixing dinner for us before she returned from work. My ultimate plan was to do something very special for us on our 2nd anniversary, and I looked forward to it. Eventually, the day of our 2nd anniversary reached, and I made all the preparations to sweep her off her feet and at least make up for the times I didn't treat her right. I even got a costly gift, the dress she would wear, and accessories to go with it. I went home early that day from work and waited hours for her to return. When she didn't return home like I expected, I called her to ask why, and she said one of her professors fixed an impromptu class, and she couldn't miss it because attending the class came with a score. I felt disappointed when I heard that but didn't try to argue. I expected that since it was our wedding anniversary, she wouldn't want to miss a special occasion like that. I can't explain why, but that feeling of her doing something behind me crept up again, and I couldn't shake it off this time. To be at peace with myself, I decided to check her snapshot location, and it was different from the location she schooled at. I didn't believe it at first, but after checking thrice, I realized my wife had been lying to me again. I went to the location without wasting time, and it rang a bell. It was the same apartment her classmate, whom she slept with before we married, lived in. I'd lie if I said I could explain how I felt that evening. Being heartbroken or disappointed would not describe it enough. I wanted to storm into the apartment and attack her, but I had a better idea. I called her proud parents to come over to the apartment so we could surprise her for our anniversary. I knew they would come because they would do anything for their only child. Not long after I called, her parents arrived, and we went to the apartment to say surprise. As soon as we knocked on the door and her lover came to open, her parents saw her walking totally naked inside the house. Her father yelled her name, and her mother pushed her AP aside and charged in. I'd love to say that everything was disastrous that evening. She didn't know if she was begging me or her parents. I watched her as mother screamed and questioned her, and her father stood there in shock after she covered herself with the sheets. I didn't say much. I only told her it was over between us, and that her cheating on me again was my fault. She didn't understand, and I didn't bother explaining. I don't know what happened between her and her parents after I left. She came home later that week and asked if we could talk. When I said no, she picked the things she needed and left the house. She didn't even press for me to let her explain. I didn't know what to think or assume when she acted that way. Before she came home to take her stuff, I already contacted a divorce lawyer, and when the papers were ready, she signed them without hesitation. Until today, I still wonder if she ever loved me like she claimed, or was only enjoying the tussle of power with her parents. The last time I tried stalking her on Facebook, she posted a picture of her and her AP with a much caption. I was so angry and I blocked her instantly. Because of that picture, I quit sulking and wondered if she loved me. I saw how happy she was, and I felt stupid for still living in the past and putting my life on hold. I am fine now and have moved on faster than expected. I also realized that we have power over our emotions, and feeling miserable because of a cheating spouse should never be an option. I no longer care about her. All I care about now is me and my future. Today's second story. In this story, OP married his high school sweetheart, a cop, and they had a son. Over time, she changed, leading to her arrest for public indecency after cheating on him in a police cruiser. Devastated, he divorced her and gained custody. He later remarried a woman who valued marriage, while his ex struggled with poor life choices and attempted to seduce him again. Now, let's get into the story. My wife and I were high school sweethearts. We were married shortly after she graduated from the police academy. I became an electrician. Our marriage was wonderful at first. I loved my wife's ability to operate as a respectable cop, an honorable wife at home. She never let her ego go to her head, and she still allowed me to be the leader in our relationship. Over the next 10 years of marriage, we had one son. By this time, my wife was very comfortable in her role as a cop. She joined social media, updating her followers on a daily basis about her assignments and days spent monitoring civilians. When she was younger, she never wore makeup and hardly took the time to do her hair. One morning, I noticed the change in her routine. After eating breakfast and drinking coffee with me, she'd spend an hour and a half getting ready, which included her hair and makeup. I heard her phone pinging several times. We'd been married for more than a decade at this point, so I didn't feel right asking her for her phone. Instead, right before she walked out the door, I asked her who was messaging her while she got ready. She was really surprised I even asked. She said it was her sister. That was odd because her sister hadn't spoken to her in years, due to some petty disagreement she couldn't let go. So I expressed my surprise and asked if they had made up now. She reluctantly told me they had, and everything was all good. Well, that was hard to believe, but I didn't see why my wife would lie to me. Still, I considered finding her sister on social media to ask her if this was the case. I got busy at work when I got a phone call from the local police department. This was bad. I instantly believed my wife had been injured on the line of duty. I answered it, my heart already racing. They told me my wife had been arrested. This was really bad, just not in the way I thought at first. I went to the police station, where I was told the story and showed video surveillance. They played the video first, because it was easier than trying to tell me what they saw. My wife pulled her cruiser into the parking lot of our son's elementary school. She got out and watched the children play from a distance. They were probably too far away for her to spot our son in particular. Then a second car pulls up. A man gets out and my wife rushes into his arms. It's as if they are meeting for the first time or the first time in a while. They almost immediately start making out, and I can't believe what I'm seeing. They don't care that they're in public, let alone the parking lot of school, with children playing a short distance away. AP is grabbing her, but before they stop, and she drags him by the hand into the back seat of her cruiser, leaving one door wide open. Probably so they wouldn't be trapped in the back seat. Once the car got rocking, the back door shut. They were locked in the back seat of the cruiser. Fast forward just over an hour later, when additional police show up and open the back door for them to get out. I couldn't be sure, but this had to be the worst moment in my wife's entire life. This was the worst moment of my life. Finding out that she had cheated on me so shamelessly at an elementary school while acting as an officer of law. All of my respect and adoration for my wife dissipated. I felt alone, lost, and foolish. I wanted to hold my son, which made me wonder how long my wife would be in jail. The officers didn't know. All they knew so far was that she was being charged with public rudeness, indecent exposure, and disorderly conduct. Her life would never be the same. I got to see her hours later, and I didn't have to say a word. She broke down, telling me how sorry she was. She said she'd started messaging AP online, and today was the day they decided to meet in person. She said she never thought it was going to escalate the way it did, but I told her to shut up and stop making excuses. She started an affair that she decided to consummate seconds after meeting the man. This was not the behavior of a respectable, knowledgeable police officer, wife, and mother. This was the behavior of a sleazy girl that didn't know any better. I told her how disappointed I was that our marriage was over, and that's when I started crying. All the time and feelings I had for her were wasted. The marriage I wanted to last a lifetime was over. Suddenly, I would become a single father. When I left the room, my wife was only a shell of the woman she was. I filed for divorce while she served time in prison. I gained full custody of our son. After my ex was released from prison, she started visitation with him. I could tell that after doing time, she was only thankful. She was so relieved to be free and able to see her son. She deeply apologized to me again for cheating, but I told her it was in the past now. I also found a woman worthy of a serious relationship. Believe me, I was skeptical, but her actions and the way she lived her life showed me that she wasn't the kind to underestimate the purity and sanctity of marriage. Her husband had passed away unexpectedly, which was why she was single. She hadn't slept with anyone after him. We waited until our wedding night to love each other in that way. My ex, on the other hand, was too thirsty for this traditional behavior. For months after being released from prison, she became pregnant. I was shocked because she used to be so responsible and on birth control. Of course, this man didn't want to be a father and hardly knew her, but they are still trying to co-parent while my ex continued dating. She claims to be searching for a husband, but she continues advertising herself online and sleeping with men she likes. It's no wonder why they don't see her as wife material. Here's a humorous update that just reassures me I was right to handle things the way I did. My ex then tried to seduce me one of the times I was picking up her son, even though I was married.
Today's third story. In this story, Opie had been married to his high school sweetheart for 5 years before leaving for army training. During his 10-week absence, his wife grew distant, and upon his return, she revealed she was pregnant. Realizing the dates didn't align, he confronted her, and she admitted to cheating. They divorced after a DNA test confirmed he wasn't the father. Now let's get into the story.
I, 26 male, have been in a relationship with my wife, 26 female, since high school. We were married for 5 years before I was scheduled to lead for Army training camp. It would last 10 weeks, which was the longest we'd ever been apart since meeting. She was sure it would be fine, but when the day of departure came, she started to lose it. She really didn't want me to go. She'd known it was a goal of mine to join the Army, but she still married me. We each knew and felt that we were meant to stay together, no matter what. At first, she didn't try calling me while I was away. After hours away from my phone, I was feeling homesick and thought I'd probably at least have several texts from her. There was nothing. She knew I would have my phone here and there, so I was surprised. Whenever I got her on the phone, she said she didn't know I could have my cell phone. I knew she was lying. I remembered telling her directly that I would have my phone. Throughout the rest of the time I was gone, there were 3 more nights where I didn't hear from her. The third time it happened, she called me the next morning, and after she heard my voice, she started crying. She apologized and told me she was just emotional for missing me so much. I asked her how she missed me so much if she didn't try to call me. She was hurt and said she just got busy with her friends because apparently one of them was moving away soon. When I came back, it was a glorious reunion. I moved in with her on the base while I worked for the Army. It felt like the hardest part was over. That's when I started noticing her texting a lot. I was annoyed because she'd ignored me some nights while I was away, but now her phone was always in her hand. I knew something was up even before I noticed how worried she was. I tried to check her phone while she slept one night, but I couldn't see anything without her passcode. The next morning, I was working up the nerve to ask her for her passcode when she told me she scheduled a doctor's appointment. She tried to seem optimistic. I asked her what for, and she told me she was late. Suddenly I realized she thought she might be pregnant. I was excited and hugged her. She half-heartedly hugged me back, saying that she wasn't feeling the best. I was suddenly worried that she cheated on me, and this wouldn't be my child. I looked into her eyes and seriously asked her if she had anything to tell me. She looked straight into my eyes and told me no, she didn't have anything to say. She continued looking into my eyes when she told me she loved me. Then she looked away when she said she was just nervous to have a child so suddenly. I started waiting on her hand and foot for 2 weeks until the day of her appointment. I went with her as the supportive father of this potential child. She had an ultrasound to confirm what my wife already knew. She was 7 weeks pregnant, but that didn't make sense to me. I calculated the conception date in my head, and it would have been during my absence. I glared at her straight into her eyes. I could see how fearful and worried she was right before she looked away and rushed into the bathroom sick. I got up and left to the complete disbelief of the technician. I sat in the car, fuming until my panicked wife caught up to me. We had it out in the car. I told her the conception date made no sense, and I believed she cheated on me one of the nights she didn't contact me. She broke down crying, admitting that what I believed was true. She wanted to continue talking, to try to explain, but I just told her to get out of my car. I repeated myself without giving her the chance to speak. Eventually, she got out sobbing. I sped off. She wasn't the woman I thought I knew. Since high school, our entire intimate relationship was worth less to her than some man she slept with while I was gone. She got a ride from her mom back to her house. She banged on the door like it was my fault her daughter was left in the hospital parking lot. I spoke to her through the Ring doorbell, telling her I would have nothing to do with her or her cheating daughter. She was only offended and asked how I knew I wasn't the father of her child. I was losing my patience, but I told her the approximate conception date, which was right in the middle of my training camp dates. She looked at her daughter like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. Under her mother's gaze, my wife broke down crying on my porch. She sat down, giving up. My MIL just said things like she thought she was joking and couldn't believe she would do this. She actually clarified with her, getting her to admit out loud that she slept with another man while her husband was away. My MIL was in such disbelief that she just started walking back to her car. My wife got up to follow her, desperate for a ride somewhere, anywhere. She didn't know what to do. She kept asking her mom to open the door and what she should do. After a few minutes, she let her in and they drove away. Before the divorce was final, We got DNA test results that proved I was not the father. I found it pointless to ask her any more questions about why she did what she did. I wanted nothing to do with her. I only wanted to move on and live my life. I started hoping to find a noble woman, someone I could be proud to call my wife, and I found her years later after I served in the army. I'm proud to say that my wife is not vain, despite the fact that she's the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. We own a farm together, away from all the nonsense that makes up a majority of the US. She's a traditional woman that doesn't need attention or likes from people outside of our marriage. While we are expecting our first child, my ex-wife is expecting her fourth child with her newest boyfriend of 5 months. He agreed to let her and her 3 kids move in with him since he's getting older and wants a family. I don't think they'll last.